Inferences. What are inferences? Our definition says that inferences are information that is not directly stated or said, but rather figured out by reading between the lines, a guess of what it could mean. Some synonyms for inferences would be conclusion, reasoning, speculation, guess, or assumption. How do you make an inference? To make an inference, a reader or listener takes information provided by the writer or speaker, combines it with background knowledge and prior information relevant to the situation, and extracts an unstated or implied idea from the communication. Implied inferences. So you take textual information, meaning ideas from the text that are said, you combine it with your prior knowledge that has to relate to your text, and you can make an inference. So speakers or writers may imply an idea, either consciously or subconsciously. When an idea is implied, it is expressed without being explicitly said, meaning that it's not said outright. If the listener or reader understands this unstated idea, he or she makes an inference or infers the idea. Here's an example. Susan might ask Tiffany for a ride home. If Tiffany does not feel like transporting Susan, Tiffany might respond with the following statement, "My car is pretty crowded." Though Tiffany never clearly says, "No, I won't give you a ride home, Susan," this is the implied message. If Susan does not make this inference, Susan might insist that she can fit in the vehicle or sit on someone's lap. Then Tiffany will have to be more explicit and tell Susan right out that she doesn't feel like giving her a ride. So whether in courts of law, classrooms, or casual conversations, implied messages are not always understood, and inferred messages are often unintended or faulty. Inferences are not always neutral. They depend on the reader's or listener's beliefs and presumptions, but they must be based on evidence, or else they are assumptions, not inferences. So, in other words, you can't just assume things and it be the same thing as an inference. You have to use evidence to back up what you think you're inferring. So, sometimes multiple inferences can be made. Here's an example. Kevin nervously went to the locker room after practice. Today was the last day of tryouts, and he wasn't sure where he stood. Kevin always tried his best, but he wasn't the fastest, or the best hitter, or capable of catching a fly ball. Still, though, he wanted to be on the team because his dad loved basketball, and Kevin wanted to make him proud. A crowd of guys were huddled around the team list, and most were celebrating. After they thinned out a bit, Kevin looked for his name. Jimmy Swanson, Kevin's neighbor, was standing next to him. Jimmy hollered out, "Yes, shortstop," and pranced away. Kevin lowered his head and walked away from the list. Water welled in his eyes. It would be a long walk home. So, did Kevin make the team? Well, the answer isn't clearly stated in the text, which is why we have to make an inference. While it is possible to support both conclusions, that he did make it or he didn't make it, one conclusion is more likely than the other, which would be that he didn't make it. Although you could argue that Kevin cried because he was so happy that he made the team, that would ignore that the evidence from the text says that he couldn't catch the ball. And remember, to make an inference, you have to use evidence that's given. Otherwise, it's just an assumption. Also, based on prior knowledge, one might deduce, or you might deduce, that time seems to move slower when things are not going well. Therefore, since time is moving slower for Kevin, he did not make the team. Although it is never clearly stated, based on the information in the passage, it is more likely that Kevin did not make the team, or at least that his name was not on the list. So let's review Making inferences is more difficult than understanding and locating information in a text, but it is something that good readers do. To make an inference, use your background knowledge or prior information to draw logical conclusions based on textual details. Though your inferences may not always be valid, by simply making inferences you open the dimensions of communication beyond what is explicitly communicated. If we look at our picture here, we have our inference equation. You have what you read, which is use quotes from the text and note page number or future reference. Add that to what you already know, which is background knowledge and prior experience from your own life. And then that combined, you can come up with an inference, what you infer. Put two and two together and make a conclusion about the story.